Here's Cindy.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think we are good.
Okay, the Thursday, August 27, 2020 virtual regular meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission will now come to order. This virtual meeting is compliant with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, allowing for deviation of teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. Consistent with the order, this format provides a safe environment for staff, commissioners, and the public while allowing for open participation. This meeting is being broadcast on Comcast Channel 27 and the city's YouTube channel at youtube.com/BrisbaneCA. The agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org. Any written comments submitted in advance of the meeting have already been provided to the Commission. For those who would like to make a comment, a call-in telephone number was provided on the agenda, which can be viewed online. The phone number and instructions will also be provided during the meeting. Staff, please call the roll.
Commissioner Gomez.
Here.
Commissioner Mackin.
Here.
Commissioner Patel.
Here.
Commissioner Sayasan.
Here.
The record show Commissioner Gooding is absent.
Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I make a motion to adopt.
Okay. And a second.
I'll second.
Okay, and can we have take a voice vote?
Commissioner Gomez.
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Sayasan.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. Next is the consent calendar. If there is any member of the public who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar, please call us within the next 30 seconds. While we're waiting, is there any commissioner who would like to remove an item? Okay, I see no.
Okay, 30 seconds has passed. No one is in the waiting room.
Okay, may I have a motion to adopt, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, and can we have a voice vote?
Commissioner Gomez.
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Sayasan.
Aye, the motion passes. Oral communications. If there is any member of the public who wishes to address the Commission about an item that's not on tonight's agenda, please call or text within the next minute. Okay, while we're waiting, I'll go to written communications. I don't have any before me. Staff, do we have any?
I do not.
Thank you.
We have 40 seconds left on our timer. Okay, the timer has elapsed. I have no one waiting in the waiting room.
Okay, next on the agenda is we had planned a public hearing which concerns 213 Visitation Avenue, design permit DP-2 and use permit UP-4-20. It concerns NCRO-2 Neighborhood Commercial District, downtown Brisbane. The design permit and use permit is for a new 6,477 square foot, 3-story mixed-use building with 4 dwelling units, a 2-car private parking garage, and a 263 square foot ground floor commercial storefront. Mark Topicher is the applicant and Arcus Housing is the owner. Staff, you indicated that the applicant would like to continue this matter to another date. Is that correct?
That is correct. They've requested continuance to a date off calendar.
Okay. May I have a motion to continue, please?
I make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Commissioner Gomez, you made a motion. Second? Commissioner Mackin?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, can we have a voice vote, staff?
Commissioner Gomez,
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Saison.
Aye. The motion passes. Okay, next is items initiated by staff. Staff, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you have one item on your agenda. I mean, it's kind of a legacy item in a way, and I think I provided you a very brief report. The grading ordinance, a comprehensive update, has been started several years ago, probably before any of the current commissioners were on the commission. That had actually been recommended for approval by the Planning Commission at the time to the City Council. The Council ultimately tabled the item. There are other business items requiring their time. Earlier this month, the City Council Infrastructure Committee revisited the draft ordinance and recommended it be forwarded to City Council for consideration. Again, I sent you a copy of the link to the entire packet, just for the Commission's the primary area of sort of maybe concern or sort of interest would be the fact that it does change the Commission's role in reviewing grading. Right now, the Commission's review is tied to criteria of earthwork, and it's recommended that sort of the criteria for Commission review be modified so the Commission would not be involved in reviewing standalone grading. Basically, the Commission's opportunity to review grading will be presented in projects that you have discretionary authority over, such as design permits, use permits, variances, etc., where grading is an element or component of the project. And in that regard, your sort of review of the grading would be in the context of the overall project and the findings you're obligated to make for the entitlement you're considering. So there won't be a set of separate standalone findings for grading per se. So again, with that, I provided some materials from the city manager and the city attorney. And again, it's just provided as an informational item, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, John. Commissioners, I'll go around and ask if any of you have questions for our staff. We'll start with Commissioner Gomez. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. In reading this, it was interesting to me, considering I think the recent discussions we had with the previous project. For me, as long as the grading reviews would be a component within the larger process of reviewing an entire project, I don't necessarily see any. I don't see any issues here, so I don't have any direct questions for staff at this time.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Patel.
No, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Mackin.
I do have a question. So, Julia or John, if either of you could comment when any of these grading permits, let's say whether it's tied to construction of a home or not, are notices sent to the neighbors, and could you tell us what form those notices take, and how far in advance of a project, and how many homes? I think, Julia, you once alluded to how many homes along a street in the vicinity, adjacent, across the street, and adjacent street. So I just would like some clarification.
A typical grading permit is a ministerial action that's considered by the Public Works Director, similar to a building permit. When a building permit application is filed, that doesn't require any kind of discretionary review. There is no public review or notification of a grading permit or building permit being filed.
So are you saying if that's a standalone grading permit, even if it's attached to another permit for a project, say construction of a new residence?
If the underlying permits are ministerial, so it's a home, a building permit for a home, for example, that would not require any kind of notification. The grading that is ancillary to that home grading or home building is also a ministerial permit, and no notifications required.
So just clarifying then, the only way that these grading permits would come to the Planning Commission is if they were attached to a variance on some sort of construction or remodel of a dwelling.
Correct. The design
And
permit, design permit, a variance, use permit. If there's any discretionary permit, then, and there's grading, you can consider as part of the whole of the action that's you're looking at.
Okay. And so if that was a grading permit attached to a variance that was coming before the Planning Commission, what notice is given to the neighbors?
So typical discretionary permits, every discretionary permit, we do a mailed notice to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. And that's at least 10 days before the hearing. And that's what we do for any discretionary permit that comes before the commission.
Okay, so just kind of to sort this out, if there were no grading permits coming to the Planning Commission and this change is made, then there would be no notification, because it would be, as John, you said, ministerial. It would just go to the city engineer, and that would be processed as normally just moving a permit along. Is that correct?
Correct. It's the same way that grading permits that don't meet the yardage threshold that triggers Planning Commission review. It would be the same process for those permits as well.
So may I ask what we are reviewing tonight? And then, John, thank you. You provided a link to the subcommittee agenda and report. Is this to be voted on by the full council?
Yes.
And so have they seen this at all, this draft?
Just the subcommittee, the infrastructure subcommittee saw it and recommended it on to the full council.
Okay, so I'd just like to have everyone take a moment and consider something. Let's say you wake up in your house one morning, it's 8 in the morning, and you hear a noise, and you say, that's strange. You go to your front window, you look out there, there's a bulldozer coming rumbling down your street. Behind it's a backhoe, and there's followed by 2 dump trucks. Then we look further, there's another truck, and there's a bunch of guys in green vests. They all get out. The bulldozer starts going next door to your house, and it starts removing dirt from the hillside. And you go, wow, what's going on? You go out of your house, you go down, you find the foreman on the job or the supervisor, and you say, what's going on? And he says, well, they're going to build this house here. And you say, wow, nobody told me. And he says, I don't know what to tell you. Went through planning, went through the city engineer. It's all good to go. You're going to have to talk to them. It's your city department. It's not me. I think I'd like to hear some feedback from fellow commissioners. I think even if we're not noticing property owners on a lot of ministerial things, especially with grading where they're removing, even if it falls under the threshold that used to bring it to planning, I think the property owners deserve to be notified on these things and not find out when people just show up with a bunch of trucks. I would be very, very, very upset if that happened to me. And I don't know if this is possible, but other than doing a mailing, and maybe we do a mailing, but I know in some cities, if you have a lot where there's going to be a construction project, even a new residence, they put a wooden stake in the ground, they put a piece of plywood on the stake, and they post a notice so that all the neighbors, if they're walking by or driving by, and I know, Julia, we've had people where they've said to you very angrily, I never got that notice in the mail. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, maybe it got stuck in the mail. It's really hard for you to say, oh no, we mailed it to you, because once it's out of your hands, who knows, right? It's not fair to you. But I think also, sometimes, once in a while, legitimately, there are people who claim they didn't get a notice. They probably didn't, just because maybe it never made it to them through the mail. I'd like to see that wooden stake in the ground, that ministerial or not, when we're doing big projects, that I think the neighbors deserve to know. And I'm not trying to create problems for the planning where you might have people showing up and going, oh, I didn't know this was happening and I don't like it, whatever. But I think that just out of the courtesy and respect, we all work for all the residents, not just someone doing a construction project. And if they have to make accommodations on those upper streets for parking, or if they're going to have a lot of construction trucks where they can't get out of their driveway to go to work or take kids somewhere or a doctor's appointment, we're disrupting their lives. And I've lived through it. I had a construction project across the street from me for over a year, and it was awful. It was awful. So I think that that's something I'd like to discuss with the commissioners. I'd like to see a notification, whether it's ministerial or not. I think we owe people that. And I have another point, but I don't want to go on and on. Our chair has not, you've not had a chance to speak.
Yes, at least.
If we can come back, yes. I have another point.
Thank you, Commissioner Mackin. Actually, I had the same concerns that you had when I was going through this, because I understand we're making this change because of state law and whatnot, and that grading has to go directly to the city engineer, and it's ministerial now. But, you know, we've had a practice where, you know, we used to have a public hearing, where people were given the opportunity to come and, if there was any issues with it, that they had with the construction, or maybe they know something about the land that we don't. Or the city engineer, maybe they could enlighten the city engineer. So I think notice is important, and the opportunity for public input is important. And I would agree with Commissioner Mackin that I think there should be like a wooden stake of a notice and a mailer. I'd like to be thorough about this and give people the opportunity to weigh in. So that's my, I agree. So Commissioner Gomez, do you have anything to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, embracing good communication practices, I think it's a good idea. I guess the way I look at it, I've gotten lots of mail when there have been projects in my neighborhood. I've never seen a gap in those types of communications, so that's why I didn't raise any concerns in my initial reading of the materials. But if we want to embrace communication best practices, as Commissioner Mackin suggested from other cities, I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Patel?
So I think my take on it is it's a little bit different than what Commissioner Mackin's take on it is. And I think that this particular piece of legislation that's going before the City Council, it allows us to consider grading when previously we were not able to consider grading. For example, when we were doing the analysis about the tree and the grading on Kings Canyon, I believe, I think the comment from staff was we don't really get to consider grading and approving a project, but we get to consider whether the tree would move or whatnot. So I think that, and maybe I'm wrong in that, so maybe staff can clarify that for me. It seems like it's giving us something, it's giving us a consideration that we weren't able to consider before. Is that right?
I think it's probably, there's a give and a take. For example, without getting into the details of that particular case, but, and Julie, you can correct me, but my recollection is that that particular item had no other discretionary permits required. So under the new regulations, you would not have seen it at all. So it would not have really been before the commission because it didn't have any, basically the activity, the building that was being proposed met all the city standards, and therefore no discretionary review was required. So in that case, no, you wouldn't be, that wouldn't be before the commission. But there'll be other cases potentially where you do have items that are the grading associated with a variance or some other building activity. I think we look at it as it's probably a more holistic and more appropriate for the commission to look at kind of the whole of the action, not to parse out individual pieces. And I think, I think there's a bit of and it can put you in a bad spot in a sense if the overall activity is allowed and somehow you're having to micro review one particular subset of the activity is kind of confusing to everybody. And I think the idea of if projects that are under your review, you should have the opportunity to holistically evaluate them when you make the findings on whatever permit you're issuing, but not sort of micro review, sort of separate. It's not three separate things to look at. It's a project overall, and that's really what we're trying to encourage and promote is more of a holistic view of an activity.
Can you explain, I just missed a piece, can you explain why that last project wouldn't come under purview of the Planning Commission based on this new rule?
Because it did not require any other discretionary permits. There was no variance, there was no use permit, there were no other planning permits required for this activity. It was basically a by right permitted activity. The only issue that triggered the review was the grading for that activity, but the activity itself was a permitted activity under the zoning.
And that's the concern, at least for me there, John, because if grading did not bring that project to our attention and the attention of the public, then we wouldn't have been aware of damage to the trees and potential erosion issues and all that. So, I think to remove a project like that from public consideration altogether, I think can be problematic. And, that's why, before, it came before us for a hearing. And I think at the very least, the public deserves some type of notice. Okay. Any more comments? Commissioner Mackin? Yes. Commissioner Mackin?
I just wanted to touch base with yes, thank you. I wanted to touch base with something that Commissioner Saison mentioned, which was having to do with notice. One thing I know has come up a couple times where there were projects, and I think it's kind of common knowledge that in Brisbane we have infrastructure that's been put in long ago, and there are water lines and sewer lines. Our public works probably knows a lot of them, but there are places where they honestly don't know. And once in a while you'll get a neighbor will come to one of our meetings and say, by the way, did you know there's a sewer line runs along this boundary of the property? And I think that the notification, I just want to underscore, it's not to provoke the public to all come screaming about a project. It also can be really beneficial because if there are historic things underground or things that have happened that would help the homeowner and the city engineer and everyone know more about a particular area where we have no records at all, this is a real opportunity, and I don't think we want to miss that either. But I wanted to, can I go a step further? Because I have another question here. In reading the link, John, that you provided, which is the full subcommittee agenda and report, when I followed that link, it had the draft, and there was something there that concerned me, because it said, if we take now the grading permits and they are under the purview of the city engineer, even if they exceed, I can't remember the term, the common threshold, and it goes beyond. That's usually what used to bring it to us. If someone wants to appeal it, the city engineer makes a decision and someone says, no, I don't agree with that. I have a different geologist or hydrologist or whatever it is. And they say they have a different opinion, and I think it needs to be considered. They can file an appeal, but according to this draft, the appeal goes to the city manager. And I could not understand the logic of this, in that if I refer to our city attorney, who said that by requiring the commission to make that type of evaluation and decision, it compels the commission to engage in an activity that the Business and Professions Code expressly makes unlawful. If the city manager is not an engineer, how can you have the city manager handle an appeal? He's no different than we are then, other than he's city staff and he has a title and we're appointed. And I found that troubling. I think if anything else, if this is a draft that's going to the council, I would rather see that if someone files an appeal, it comes back to the planning commission. And if we can't make a ruling with findings that require an engineer, then it goes directly to the council. I think sending it to one person again, that doesn't even make sense to me. Someone else who does not have the professional credential, which the city attorney is saying is unlawful.
I had the same question, John. Was there a rationale for that?
I mean, trying to find the actual, I'm kind of scrolling through. There are other instances in the municipal code where the city manager, it's an administrative appeal process. It doesn't go to a public body, so it's not unprecedented in the municipal code. And I don't want to prejudge what this would be, but I suspect there'd be primarily this isn't kind of typically the appeals are going to normally be limited to the issue that's in question, not a what they call a de novo appeal, where the entire matter is before the hearing body or the appeal body. So typically he's looking at a fairly limited scope of activity. But I have to really, I'd probably have to defer to the city attorney, and I'm sure he can explain that. And when this matter goes to the city council, he'll be there to explain it.
Oh, Madam Chair?
Yes. Chair Mackin.
So I would like to propose that maybe coming from us as a commission, if commissioners agree, that we ask for some formal recommendations come from the planning commission to go to the city council, one being the notification, both with a mailing and signage posted on the property for so many days in advance of construction to commence. And I would leave it posted while the construction commenced. And that it provide contact info for the property owner so that anyone adjacent neighbors wanted to contact them, might have a means to do that. I don't know if that's possible. But the second recommendation I'd like to make formally to the council from us, if you all agree, is that this appeals procedure needs to be looked at, because I still think this logic doesn't hold. And if I had an appeal, and I've gone from the city engineer who has credentials to a city manager who's one person deciding my fate on an appeal, I'm not sure we're really being fair to the public, and that bothers me, because it's not a public hearing. It's done I don't know where, and at least at the council level or at the planning commission level, it's a public hearing usually. And I think removing that, we're apt to draw the ire of people who you'll hear routinely start going, where's the transparency? So those are two recommendations. If commissioners agree, I would like to make formal to the council from the planning commission when they consider this draft.
Just a point of order, just a reminder, this is presented as an informational item, not an action item. If the commission wants to entertain something, I'm wondering, you probably could appoint an ad hoc grading subcommittee of the planning commission to formulate some recommendations. And then those could either be somehow circulated to the commission as a whole. But you're not in a position to vote on this matter tonight because it wasn't agendized as something for your consideration as an informational item. So if that's something you want to do, I'd probably recommend the ad hoc subcommittee route, and that would give you the opportunity to put something before the council.
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer to be on this ad hoc committee? Commissioner Mackin? Okay. Anyone else?
I can do it.
Okay. Commissioner Patel? Okay, you too. Thank you. Okay, any more comments? Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, staff.
We have one more staff item.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. The 338 Kings Road grading review has been appealed by the property owner, and the City Council will hear the appeal on their next meeting on the 3rd, which is next Thursday. And that's a de novo hearing. As John mentioned earlier, that means they'll consider the matter on the whole at that meeting. So the staff report will be published tomorrow on the city website. We can send out a link to that for you guys. But they will receive all of the material that went to the commission, all of the correspondence that was received during your review. The full record of the commission's consideration of the project will be presented to the council.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, then next is items initiated by the commission. Are there any items that any commissioner would like to bring up? Okay, I see none. Okay, then may I have yes, Commissioner Gomez.
Sorry, I was just coming off mute there. Before we opened up, I was just loosely inquiring around having some sort of syllabus for what types of topics we might be planning to tackle through the remainder of 2020. Really, it was in an interest of just being able to do a little bit more reading in advance. If we have issues such as this that obviously started many, many years ago that are going to be brought back up, I wanted to bring it to the other commissioners to see if there's an interest. And I don't know if that creates more work for staff, but it's just a general interest of mine of trying to understand what the rest of the year looks like. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Staff, what do you think? Is that something you could put together?
Sure, that's fair. The problem, not so much a problem, but just the reality is that the time frame of things that staff may be focusing on, there's a bit of lead time before the commission may see them. So things that are occupying our time in fall, early winter may not result in activity before the commission in the same quarter. But we're glad to kind of put together sort of we keep it running sort of tentative agenda anyway in terms of what we think is going to be coming up over a 2 to 3 month cycle. So we're glad to kind of refine that a bit and share it with the commission.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could, if it could be something we do regularly, if the commission is interested in that, maybe once a quarter or something.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Commissioner Mackin.
One suggestion that came up, talking with someone on another committee, we had workshops, and I appreciate staff. John, you took it seriously, and we had a lot of different workshops that gave us a really good insight into general plan and zoning and legislation coming up. And the comment that came to me from someone on another committee was, gee, I wish we had that, because what's very frustrating is where we don't know how things work with staff and how things are processed. And we go down the road on a topic or a project, and then we come to find it's not how we assumed it worked. And I thought it might be beneficial, and I don't know how to channel this, but you could think about it, that perhaps once a year, or it could be done by committee, commissions, whatever, that there's something that provides kind of an orientation, a workshop to understanding how things work through City Hall, and so that it provides a better basis in both crafting projects and decision making, because we should really be collaborating, and it's not easy to do that when someone then says to you, that's not how it works. So it would maybe focus all of our time better if we understood how things work, because we're all appointed and you all staff are on the payroll and you're immersed in it. And I think sometimes we probably also frustrate you, because you've got to put up with us saying, well, why can't we just blah, blah, blah? And we don't know any better. So while it's really valuable maybe to have our input and ask those kind of questions, I think it can maybe make our time more worthwhile if we really have a better grasp. And I think that would carry through with all the other committees and commissions. And the double bonus there is, too, some of them may end up being planning commissioners someday, and then they'll have all that foundation from day one. So it just keeps transferring and make all of your lives at City Hall a lot better as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think we spend a lot of time with the training we did, but you're right, it tends to stop at a certain point. We tended to stop things where your involvement ends, but there's a whole sort of administrative or ministerial process that often happens at the back end that, again, we are immersed in it. You're not involved in it, so it wasn't really on our radar to kind of provide that sort of cradle to grave sort of understanding. So I think that's really a good idea, and we could certainly do that. And I'm glad to do that for this commission. Obviously, if it's going to be something broader, that would be something the council would have to direct, because different commissions have different sort of oversight and authority, and how much overlap there is with Park and Rec Commission and Planning Commission. I don't know, but certainly if that's something the council wants to entertain, we're glad to accommodate that. But I think for this commission, I think that's a good idea about kind of maybe a broader kind of view of sort of some of the procedures that happen that you're not necessarily involved in on a regular basis or at all.
Well, John, it even could take the character of when someone makes an application for a permit, what is the process that you have that handles it? What
Sure.
is what are the time frames? What are the concerns of the applicants, so that maybe we don't know certain types of projects take a long time, and by the time they get to us, that's why sometimes, like where Commissioner Gomez says, can we have some information in advance of what's going to be coming up? It's not always possible. So that would be enlightening to us to find out what are the things that make it come to us at the last minute, because it's really been put on hold for a while. Or what are little anomalies that you might be looking at in a project? I think it would enrich what we're doing and make us more effective, and kind of allay some of the problems you run into with us, where we don't know all those nuances. Not that we're going to in one workshop, but it might also spark some questions, and then we don't have to deal with those in meetings.
Sure, that's a good idea.
And if the public tuned in, they would learn something too. Might be beneficial all the way around.
Absolutely.
The county has that Citizens Academy model that they know every year. They have folks kind of do a deep dive into county government. I'm not suggesting we do the same here, but I think there's a lot of merit and great foundation for having that kind of education and disclosure to the public what goes on at City Hall.
And they might have a greater appreciation for all the work that you do too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Great suggestion, Commissioner Mackin. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, no? Okay, then may I have a motion to adjourn until our next regular meeting of September 10, 2020?
So moved.
I make a motion.
Okay, in a second? Okay, let's do voice vote, staff.
Commissioner Gomez,
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Saison.
Aye. Motion passes. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.